Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Alba Mar, me pueden decir Alba. El canal se llama Seriela y estamos aquí para hablar de libros, algunos de ellos en español desde Puerto Rico. Hello, my name is Alba Mar. You may call me Alba. Channel name is Seriela. We're here to talk about books, and some of them in Spanish from Puerto Rico. Today is going to be an update of my recent reads, those I haven't mentioned before and the ones most recently. But I'm going to start with a mini rant, which I think is important, and I dedicate it to Marina of Young, Gifted, and Black, who was the person who pointed out to me that this is an image of Harriet Tubman. At first, I was so embarrassed because I didn't recognize Harriet Tubman. I had never seen a photograph of Harriet Tubman before. I'd only seen illustrations in children's books and the Drunken History episode. So yeah, that was my first reaction. I was embarrassed. And then my second reaction was anger. How dare you? How dare you use the image of Harriet Tubman for a story of an enslaved woman in Puerto Rico in the 19th century. I put off reading it because I thought it was going to be very dry. It even has the copies of the primary documents where the information was taken from. Then I decided to ask around, well, how could this happen? And I asked a person who is involved in editing and publishing in Puerto Rico and just said, well, those things happen. Well, that wasn't enough for me. So I looked up information about the author of the book, Carmelo Rosario Natal, Doctor in History. Carmelo Rosario Natal, may he rest in peace, was a professor at the University of Puerto Rico for 30 years at least, and was a mentor to many of the subsequent historians in Puerto Rico, such as Dr. Francisco Scarano, Dr. Yvonne Acosta Lespier, the one who wrote La Mordaza, and Dr. Luisa Ferrao, the colleagues at the Association of Historians of Puerto Rican History. I will put up a picture of Dr. Carmelo Rosario Natal up here. He wrote over 30 books on Puerto Rican history and kept our history alive. I went on his Facebook page and noticed that his last posting was in 2013, the same year in which this book was published by Ediciones Puerto, 2013. And it also says that he was residing in Arizona. He was no longer in Puerto Rico. So I'm speculating here that he retired in 1980 after 30 years. So by the time he wrote this book, he was advanced in age. And I'm thinking perhaps he was in poor health, and that's why he went to live in Arizona, perhaps with family members. And nothing else, I found nothing else about Dr. Rosario until his obituary notice in the newspaper. This is a man who wrote over 30 books of history, and not one of them made this kind of an error. So I'm assuming, I'm speculating here, of course, that it was not Dr. Carmelo Rosario Natal who decided to put the picture of Harriet Tubman on this book. And I'm wondering, Who did it? How dare you? How dare you besmirch the name of a historian, a Puerto Rican historian like this? And how dare you hoodwink the Puerto Rican reader into thinking this was Agripina? Now, it's doubly bothersome to me and angers me so much because Don Carmelo tells a very powerful story here. Agripina was an enslaved Puerto Rican woman who was gifted to a Doña Laura when she was a year and a half. And Doña Laura enslaved her until Agripina, Juana Agripina, was 14 years old and sold her to this man, I won't say his name, to serve as his concubine. And after Doña Laura does that, she asks this man to lend her Juana Agripina because she needs a servant for a trip to Venezuela and Latin America. Just so happens that at the time that she takes Juana Agripina to Venezuela, Venezuela was free, was a republic, and no longer recognized slavery. There was a law passed in Spain, that said that if you were found, a slave went to a free territory, they were no longer slaves. And Agripina, being 14, did not find out this information until she was an adult. And when she was 40-something years old, she went to Ponce, to the courts there, and claimed her right to be free because she had gone to Venezuela at such and such a date. By that time, she no longer belonged to the enslaver that had wanted her as a concubine. He tired of her and sold her off to someone else. Not surprisingly, and Dr. Rosario mentions this, how many times documents, official documents, go missing here in Puerto Rico. The documentation of that trip and of Doña Laura's enslaving of Juana Agripina disappeared. So they sent Juana Agripina back to her enslaver, who got tired because Juana Agripina kept claiming her liberty. She kept saying that she was free and kept rebelling and protesting. Her enslaver at that time got tired of it and rented her out to someone in Lajas, Puerto Rico. But she kept on protesting and rebelling. They put her in shackles. And in shackles, she walked, hiding her shackles, 15 kilometers from Lajas back to Ponce to insist on her freedom, that she was free. It's a powerful story of a woman who was adamant about her right to be free. And if I'm not mistaken, this is Dr. Carmelo Rosario Natal's last book. Powerful story. I wrote to the publishers, Ediciones Puerto. I wrote them a text. And I suggested that when this is reprinted, and I hope it is reprinted, that they use a different cover. They can do what Sulmari Alverio Ramos did in La Gran Ausente about Celestina Cordero Molina. Have one of our excellent Puerto Rican artists draw a picture of what they thought Agripina looked like. That's just a suggestion. The fact that Agripina resorted to the courts to find justice, to seek justice for herself, reminds me of the main character here in Fe en Disfraz by Mayra Santos Febres, who was a scholar and also a historian, the main character of this novel, who went to Brazil to study the claims of especially enslaved Black women in Brazil, and how studying those documents affected her as a scholar. Yeah, I just had to have that rant and thank Marina from Young, Gifted, and Black. And if you have not subscribed to that channel, I highly recommend that you look up Marina at Young, Gifted, and Black. I'll link it down below because she is fantastic and I love her. And I thank her for this jaunt that I went through in Puerto Rican history. Thank you, Marina. Te quiero. Gracias. And now to the updates. What did I read before? Recent reads. I forgot to mention that in December, I got to know Barbara Neely a little bit. I read Blanche on the Lam. How much fun was that? It's a mystery, and Blanche is on the lam. She decides that police are after her, and she's going to go to Long Island. She gets a job in Long Island and hides out in Long Island, and what happens there. What I especially liked about Blanche on the Lam was her observations. Her observations about class, about justice, about racism. Yeah, it was a fun book, but that doesn't mean that she wasn't aware and woke at the time. Yeah, really enjoyed Barbara Neely's Blanche on the Lam, and I look forward to reading more of Barbara Neely's books. And then in January, I told you that I finished From Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation by Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor, and I have forgotten to mention that one of the things that stood out to me was how she admonishes and advises organizations to beware of nonprofit organizations and foundations and taking money from these people. That was an eye-opener for me. Yeah, great. Then I finished, that was in January, I think, James Baldwin's If Beale Street Could Talk. This was a sweet story. I found it a very sweet story, a love story of a couple. And El Novio, the male protagonist, finds himself in jail, and how that affects everyone in the family. Everyone. Yeah. James Baldwin, can't ask for much more than that. Yeah. I found it a very sweet, sweet story. Okay. And I also finished reading earlier this month in February for the Octavia Butler slow read over there with Njeri at ONYX Pages. I will link that down below. I finished Mind of My Mind, which was I borrowed from the library on Overdrive. And yeah. Yeah, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind. I am looking forward to the rest of the series. It's the story of, I think it's the first of this series, and it's the story of a godlike figure. It's a godlike figure, but a malevolent godlike figure who is seeking people like him, with powers like him, where they're like psychic powers of the mind. Yeah, there are a lot of themes here that have to do with mind control and psychic powers. That was new to me. All of this is new to me because I'm not a science fiction person. So I had to go slow and digest it. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series, if it doesn't blow the rest of my mind. Okay, and then after that, I mentioned the wondrous life of Maryse Condé, but what I didn't mention about the wondrous life of Ivan and Ivana was that there are many trigger warnings. It has a lot of graphic violence. There's rape, there's incest. If you don't like meta, if you don't like the author's voice coming in every once in a while, if you bristle at the fact that the author is interpreting things for you, then don't read it. But I enjoyed it very much. I relished in the fact, to me, that as an elder author, Maryse Condé threw everything to the wind and said, I'm going to say what I want to say the way I want to say it. Okay? And I think she's entitled to do that. Yeah. I loved it. I really loved it. That's why I'm continuing with Maryse Condé this month and reading Segu. Then I told you House of Stone, which is another one that I want to caution you about. There are a lot of trigger warnings because it has to do with war and how war affects the different characters in this novel. I finally saw the interview with her. There's a book chat of around 20 minutes and then also an interview of the author in Zimbabwe, which was very, very interesting. I will link those down below. I love this book so much that I went to order this beautiful copy. It hasn't arrived yet. And I also ordered an ARC, which you're not supposed to sell, but it was cheap, so yeah. And that's the one I'm going to scribble in when I reread this book. I also ordered the audio book to be able to hear. I hopefully want to hear the accents and the pronunciations of the places and the names in this book. Yeah. Loved it. Thank you, Didi, with recommendation for the group that Didi has over on Patreon. Yeah. And then for Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, I finally read Why We Cant Wait, which includes the letter from the Birmingham jail, which was another one of the things that I had wanted to get to. Oh boy, was this powerful. This little book packs a punch. Yes, yes. This is a definite must read. And I'm going to read it again next year for Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. Thanks to Doris for the opportunity to read Cuba Libre by Tony Perotet. This was a surprise. This was a surprise. Haven't talked to Doris yet about the ending. I finished it recently, day before yesterday, I think it was, but I haven't gotten a chance to talk to Doris about it. we've had some good conversations. It's called El Che, Fidel, and the Improbable Revolution. Yes, because it was like a comedy of errors, the start of the Cuban Revolution. And how grueling it was for the rebel army up there in Sierra Maestra. It goes through all of the trials and tribulations of the rebel army and what was happening during the last few days of the Batista dictatorship in Cuba. It reads like an adventure thriller. That's what it reads like. And the only criticism that I have about it is that it is directed towards a United States audience. Dozens and dozens of references to United States pop culture. And this edition is in Spanish, and I commented to Doris that I wonder how people in Latin America who are reading this book, or people who speak Spanish in other places of the world, would react to all of the references to TV personalities and film personalities and things like that in this book, that he just takes for granted that you know that you're talking about the Three Stooges, Los Tres Chiflados, Ed Sullivan, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. But I found it a very engaging read. Once I, sat down with it, it was hard to put down. So, yeah. Thanks, Doris. I really appreciate this. I've started reading, this is a collection of stories called San Juan Noir, edited by Mayra Santos Febres for this month. And I've read 2 stories already, and as it says there, these are noir stories, crime, not happy, positive stories about different places in Puerto Rico. Different authors such as Wilfredo Burgos Matos, Luis Negrón, Janet Becerra, Yolanda Arroyo Pizarro, Ernesto Quiñones, and others. This one is in English, but there's also a Spanish edition that I'm hoping to get because there's some phrases that I keep wondering what the originals were. Yeah. And I'm continuing with Saving Jesus from the Church, which is what number 15 in the Booktube spin. So I'm finally going to get to this one. That's besides everything else that I'm doing, like for These Truths by Jill Lepore over at Karen Evans' channel. We have a Voxer group that is, dangerous to my pocket. Because they're enablers, and they're always telling us in that group what's on sale. This is on sale, that's on sale. Grab it now. Yeah, having fun with that. So that's it for now, people. Please take care of yourselves. I know it's been rough, but that's why we read, right? Not only to escape, but to learn and expand our minds. We'll talk about that in some other video. Yeah. And mi gente, los quiero mucho. Cuídense. Sigan leyendo. Adiós.